members. This is the driver of the ship, pursuer of advice and a good time and an adventure. This is the captain speaking, and we are ready to sail towards our next conversation. And I'm here joined with my very, very special friend, my guest, MaMaCafecito. How are you doing today?
We friends?
Yeah, well, not really friends. Well, I mean, we could be friends if you want to be friends. This is my lovely spouse, the lover of my life, the person who I choose to share the rest of my life with. How you doing today?
I'm good. Hi, everyone.
They are silently clapping and saying, "Welcome to the show."
Thanks, everyone.
In all seriousness, no, it's about time we had you on the show. I mean, we've done a lot in the time that we've had over the last couple of podcasts, and I think your time was definitely much warranted. So I think we'll just go ahead and dive right into what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to kind of a little bit set the platform as far as getting to know who you are. Miss, can I call you Mama?
Mama.
Mama. I'm going to call you Mama because cafecito doesn't sound that great off the tongue if you're not Spanish, but
What?
Mama, there we go. So talk to me about 2018, Mama. What are some of your wins and your losses, if you don't mind sharing?
I think my win was my loss, though. I plan and overplan my entire life. I have a very hard time with letting things go. And when things don't go according to plan, I don't take it very well. And 2018 pretty much, excuse my language, told me to go fuck myself. And I had to grow, and everything that I was fighting to keep afloat ended up falling apart, and I think that was my greatest blessing.
When throughout the year did you realize that your greatest loss was going to be your biggest win?
When shit started working again, we as a couple, we made the decision for you no longer to work, and stay home, and that was both scary, but at the same time was the best decision that we could have ever made as a couple and as individuals. And for me, in the beginning, I remember I was like, oh shit, now I'm financially responsible for our family, which we both know wasn't always the case. You were the one that held it down for a very long time. So when I had to take in those reins, for me, I was like, I'm gonna fuck up, and then we're just gonna live under a bridge.
Yeah, we're gonna fall on your fucking face. You're gonna fall on all of our faces. And I think we did something pretty cool there. Kind of flipped the gender role tradition. We had a conversation before with Sai, who's a lot of you don't know, is Mama's little brother. But we were talking about how certain households are being run in regards to who does what, who pays the bills, generally speaking. And I'm pretty sure you're aware of in most households, the man is the guy who's the breadwinner and brings home the bacon. That's where that term pretty much comes from. And the woman is the one that's home that does a lot of the cooking, the cleaning, and so on and so forth. But as we progressed over the years, we've learned that a lot of more not traditional, but more forward-thinking households kind of don't really have those roles, And I think, just like you were saying before, I had my oh shit moment where it was like, I was home with our son, our 2-year-old son at the time, and I was having my oh shit moment, like, oh my god, like, I'm in charge of making sure this kid's gonna survive the day, and I don't have, like, you to contact all the time because you're busy at work, and I have 1,000 things to do, and no one to really call upon. But in a sense, it did pretty much help me stretch my comfort zone, per se. I learned how to cook, which is great.
Yeah, you did.
I learned how to clean, which was great. And then I learned how to, balance and do a juggling act of doing the cooking, the cleaning, and the maintaining of the household, and at the same time making sure that everyone's good. And I'm gonna have to give you a shout out because that shit's not easy.
Hey, stay at home mama.
That shit is
now you get me.
Not easy, but I mean, for the most part, for us at least, we both learned a lot from doing those trials and tribulations. I learned how to be more self-sufficient, and I know how to pick up on things. So, that role doesn't necessarily lean on you too much. I can help out in this, that, and the other. And then so it is the same with the flip side as far as you being more cognitive as far as the budget, or where households running and what we're paying for and where our money's going. And I think if anything, you've grown a lot in that sense. So
yeah,
tell me a little bit more about that as far as learning how to budget and this, that, and the other.
I mean, I think we gotta give credit where credit's due. I think we've always been really good at like fitting into the box that we need the other person to fit in, for the time being. So I mean, for a very long time, like I was a stay-at-home mom, and because we felt that it was best for our son for me to stay home and for you to work. And then then I decided to go back to school. Then I decided to change careers. So I think we've really we have to give each other a pat on the back, when it comes to being able to switch gears and not say, well, I'm a man, I do this, you're a female, you do this, because that just doesn't work. That's very old fashioned, and that's not how we progress together, and that's not how any couple progresses, or should progress, So pretty much back to what we were talking about originally. 2018 was a smack in the face in the best way possible. We decided that you weren't going to work. I decided that I wasn't going to finish grad school for now. I switched careers right in the midst of all the shit happening in our personal life.
And that was insane. Oh my God, what a time.
Yeah, we went from, okay, you work in the city, I work here, I have a little basic job that's going to allow us to pretty much, for me to still take on the mom role while you work. And then all of a sudden we sat down, I remember that day, and we were like, what are we going to do, because this is not working and we need to survive, and I love you and you love me, but something's got to give. Which was right around the time that I got a letter like, hey, you got your dream job, what are we going to do about this, and how we're going to squeeze in your dream job with no longer going to school and Danny staying home. And you're right, I had to learn how to budget because, again, I got to say, in a sense, and for lack of a better term, you spoiled me. You were working, you were paying the rent, you paid for school, you paid for me being at home. The money that I was bringing in was money for me and for Noah, and it was pretty much like, okay, whatever, So it got to the point where I was like, okay, no, now I got a budget because now my money matters. So how do I do that? How do I go from buying any shoe that I want and filling my closet and empty shopping, and I say empty shopping because I was shopping to fill a void of being, bored at home.
I never heard that term. That's actually really interesting. Empty shopping.
Yeah. Because there's this gratification that we get when we fill a cart, particularly women. And I say that because I had conversations with a lot of my friends. Oh, I'm stressed out. Okay, well, then let's go shopping. There's that instant gratification of seeing these new shoes and seeing these new purses and things and buying it. And then you're happy in the moment, when you're checking out, you're like, oh, look, I got a new bag. And you're so excited about that bag. But then the next day, then what? You know what I mean? It didn't change your reasoning for buying it.
It was like a small instant shot of dopamine to your brain.
Yeah.
Buy something, you're happy, it's great, and then it gets shoved into the closet.
It's empty shopping. It really is, and it's so funny. It's such an oxymoron, but it speaks volumes. And I noticed that I was doing that often. My biggest complaint at the time when you were working, as much as you were, was we never got to spend time with you. It was just, the baby and I. The baby and I would do things. We would always, all the events. I would be sending you pictures like, look, you're missing out, and I would go to the mall every single weekend like clockwork. Mm-hmm. I have my closest friend and I, we would meet at the mall. We'd go to Starbucks. We'd walk around the mall. It got to the point where our poor child would ask me to go to the mall or go to Target because it became such a routine. And I was filling our closet of things for no reason. To fill the void of, damn, I miss my husband. Damn, I wish he didn't have to work that much. Damn, what can I do to, fill that void of him, of saying, I miss him, because I can't tell him not to work because we can't sustain our lifestyle if he's not working.
Or so we thought.
And then, 2018, I believe in manifestation and speaking into existence. I think I manifested all the shit that we went through.
For the best in the worst, but I think it was well warranted.
I definitely feel like I manifested lessons. I wanted us. I felt like I wasn't being my best possible self. At the time, I think you were not being your best possible self, and neither of us wanted to kind of give up that life that we were living, because we felt like it gave us purpose. You know what I mean? You being good at work was validation for you. Me being good at whatever it is I chose to do that day, that gave me validation. And that lifestyle and that ability to spend and live the life and do the things that we wanted to do was self-validating. But it took away from all the things that we were really seeking, which was family time, which was self-care, which was being with one another, which was learning and growing. And we weren't doing that because we were busy grinding. And I think that we confuse, especially now in the 21st century, we're taught that grinding and growing are not the same thing. Or like you gotta basically choose one, and it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't at all, and I think that you hit the nail on the head on that one when we were talking about grinding versus growing. I think we catch ourselves in situations when we're working so much, and our energies are, I would say, the universe is telling us that you're ready to move into the next role, and we may be thinking or maybe too complacent into making that decision. Thus, you having to go to the mall all the time and me being working all the time. Those are who we were years ago, when we were first entering the workplace and we were first young and, had nothing to lose. And, as we grow older, we tend to not realize that, our priorities are going to have to change because who we are, we're changing ourselves. I may understand the importance of money when I'm young because I didn't have a lot of it. So yeah, it was easy for me to grind out and work for a paycheck. But then I started realizing that money isn't really what makes me happy. What makes me happy is, spending time with the person that I love, spending time with my family. These things start becoming more valuable to me. And it also teaches me that, what you value adapts to who you are at the time that you're living it. So yes, I mean, I may be in the later half of my 20s, but it's my mindset's completely different, and I was fighting with not believing that and fighting to live that dream that eventually everything kind of had to self-destruct, and I had to completely start with a new clean slate. We both did. So, and we saw what we got out of it, a lot more benefits than anything else, and we challenged a lot of our fears. And I mean, I'm pretty happy as far as where we are now and what else we're going to be tackling. How about yourself?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, 2018, I can't even say it sucked, but it was definitely a lesson learner for me. It was, I learned, I literally grew. Like, we use that term loosely, like I mentioned, now it's all about, 21st century, we're opening that third eye, bringing awareness and growing, but no one really knows what the hell that means.
Mm-mm.
Like, but I can honestly tell you that I grew. I went from saying, I think my brother mentioned it in your previous podcast how we grew up, where like my dad paid for everything. My mom was like, she was present in our life. She worked, but if she any moment she could just stop working, and it was just all about the kids. And I grew up with that mindset. I grew up where I felt like I needed to be taken care of instead of taking care of someone.
Oh, I like that. Look at your wordplay. Stepping your game up, huh?
I did spend a lot of money in college to be an English major. I think that
a
came into play. That debt for English major, I think it worked. So I think that, this year taught me that, it's okay to play both roles, especially if the person's worth it, and that's why making that decision to be like, yo, don't work, let's figure it out, give each other time, you do work, focus on school, focus on what you need to focus on, I got this, for me was an eye-opener, and it made me feel really happy because it felt like I was giving back what you had given me for all these years. And even more than that, it taught me that I'm capable of doing things on my own, because I don't consider myself a feminist, but I feel like that's a whole nother podcast.
Oh, yeah. We'd have a lot of people on that one.
But I do consider myself a strong woman, and though I boast about it as being a strong woman and being able to hold down a household and having a kid at the age that I am, I finally felt like I was truly being a strong woman, because a strong woman, in my definition, is knowing when you can take a different role in order to hold your family down. Now I don't have to cook and clean to be, the woman of the house. I can cook, clean, and cut a check, and I think that to me was big. Learning that about myself. So I think that coming into this year, I feel like I got this. That's the mentality that I got.
Yeah, you're ready. You're ready. You're a well seasoned veteran. You're not afraid to make sacrifices, and you're not, you know, quote unquote shitting the bed when if something were to happen. God forbid, if I do need to make a career change again, or I need to take backseat, it's not that difficult because we know what we need to do,
Yeah.
and then we're ready, we're prepared, and I like to say that last year was the year of the growth, and I would also say it's the turning of the page, and the page that needed to be turned a while ago.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
I think for me, 2018 was literally grow through what you go to.
Mm-hmm.
And we literally grew through what we went through. I feel like we're solid. It's funny. A lot of the transitions that Danny and I made, one, because the universe said so, and two, because we chose to make decisions, was around April of 2018, which is around my birthday and your birthday. So it was literally our, for those believers of the universe, was our regrowth,
Mm-hmm.
And then, even then, honestly speaking, and I live off of being honest, we questioned our relationship at one point. It's like, yeah, don't want to be with this guy because this is too much. This is a lot's going on. Like,
Yeah.
is it, we got a baby, but we could co-parent.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, that's what we went through. But then in August, I really sat down and I said, no, this is 8 years, the 8th month. Let's make it work. Let's make it legal. Let's bind each other legally now. Even though we've been married spiritually. And I think that was another decision that we made, that was grow through what you go through. That was another one for me. So again, 2019 is pretty much, I got this. What do you have for me, universe? I'm open to all positivity. I'm open to allowing you to open and close doors for me. How are we gonna move and grow as a family and as individuals?
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of moving into the new year, and I wanna talk about a little bit about our connections, and or I would call it quote unquote friendships.
Man, listen.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about a couple of things there, not get too deep, but yeah, I feel like the friendships and connections. I said this on my last podcast as well, that I wasn't the biggest expert in connections that I would want to be this year moving forward. But as far as your friendships in general, what do you define as a friendship? If someone were to give you or ask you a quote unquote, what is a friend?
A friend is someone who's able to meet you where you're at. I'm a social worker. Mental health is my career path, and that's a huge one. That's where we're always taught from day one in school. Meet somebody where you're at, and that's pretty much my work slogan. And I never really understood what that meant until I needed somebody to meet me where I was at. And what I mean by that is somebody that's able to roll their sleeves up and go through the mud with you. Not somebody who's like, oh, it sucks to be down there.
Mm-hmm.
How am I gonna help you out?
Empathy versus sympathy.
Yeah, and I love Brene Brown, and she talks about being in the arena and having you not being a jackass whisperer. You can't please everyone.
A jackass whisperer. What's
yeah.
that?
Technically, people that are your critics, everybody has something to say. Everybody's like, you should have done, shoulda, coulda, woulda. Those people, those shoulda, coulda, woulda people.
Yeah.
Oh, why didn't you do it like this? Well, no, it's not why I should have. I made the decision that I made. Are you gonna rock with me or not?
Period.
Period. You know what I mean? This is what it is. This is who I am. You like it or not. If you don't like it, then you're not my friend, and we can't be there. And then I also learned that one friend does not have to check off every box in your life.
Mm-hmm.
I can have a brunch friend. I can have a friend that I talk to once in a blue, but I know is a consistent friend, somebody that's always going to answer the phone when I call. You can have a friend who's literally your ride or die, and it just takes one person. It takes one person to just be there for you when you call them. Like, listen, I did X, Y, and Z. Can you, and they ask you what you need before you even tell them.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's friends that are there for you when you're, your party friends. And I think that for me, it took a lot of growing and heartbreak to get to that point where I was able to realize that not one person can fit all of your boxes. They can't check off every box. And if you do find that one friend, you're very lucky, and you can appreciate them. And I think that for us this year, we learned what friends get checked off in what box.
Yeah, no, of course. I think Growing up, a lot of the times we're conditioned to understand that friends are, the person who you like to be around the most. Even growing up as a kid, through grammar school and high school, it's like your friends are your people who you keep around and keep them tight, regardless of what's happening. But as you become an adult, you start to mature and you start to understand what the value of a friend is. And I think it's great that you talked about having them fit into specific boxes. I think I've lost a couple friendships myself by stretching the box a little bit too thin and trying to throw too many criteria into one box. So I like how you kind of categorized and talked about that. And I think moving forward, being more conscious about that is something that would help me maintain and establish new connections that are important. Do you think there is such thing as a best friend and the concept of that, one that's superior over the others? Even if, let's say, for example, how do you judge what a best friend would be? Would it be the one that can hit multiple points, or is it the one that can, have heart to hearts with you?
I think the best friend concept came when we were small, when we were young, and in the play yard, it was this person who made you laugh, the person that you enjoyed the most. That was the person that you considered your best friend because they took the best out of you. I think as an adult, I have changed what the definition of best friend means to me, because sometimes, let me tell you, my best friend is not the person that tells me what I want to hear. Let me tell you, but she's the person that brings out the best in me.
Yep.
And I'm lucky enough in my life to have persons like that. I have more than one person that I considered my best person because they take out the best in me.
They draw it out of you.
Yeah, so I think that's my definition of having a best friend, and I think I have more than one. As I said, those people that sometimes I talk to them and I'm like, well, this happened to me, and they're like, no, you're acting up, you're out of character, you're out of pocket, cut it out, cut it out, grow up, you're being immature. And they're, the people that are considered my best friends are people that I have hung up the phone on and not talked to for like 3 days because they said something I didn't feel was appropriate at the time, but you know what, it was exactly what I needed to hear. And those are the people that I hold near and dear. I think in order for me to categorize somebody as my best friend has to be myself. I need to be that number one person as my best friend. Because at the end of the day, no one can treat me better than I treat myself.
And that's where it starts. How do you know that you're being treated well if you never treated yourself good enough? And what happens when that person's not around?
Absolutely.
You're not going to have the same friend for forever. And sometimes friendships start and they have a finite date of when they end. Maybe you both grow apart. Maybe you both go into different avenues of your lifestyles. Maybe you just don't want to be the person's friend anymore because they don't act or do things that you support. And I think the one friendship and one bond that I'm learning now a lot more than ever is learning how to be a good friend and love who I am. Taking the time to understand what I like. And it's a lot easier when I do that, because when I see someone that I'm a good friend with or see someone that I can, hang out with, I know where they fit and which box they land in. But yeah, friendships are going to be interesting moving forward into 2019 in general. And then we'll see how things pretty much go apart. So let's talk about a little bit more of what's going on in the news. Have you heard the news? Have you watched the news? Have you been seeing what's all the Twitter chat about recently?
The R. Kelly thing, which I don't want to touch too much about because I have not watched it. However, I unfortunately am in the 21st century and I'm a queen of social media.
Yeah.
So I've been on it, and I think that I've been having a difficult time wrapping my head around it. So I want to watch it because I've heard a lot of mixed things, right? I've heard about R. Kelly. He's the man. He needs to be thrown in jail. He's raped all these black women. Black babies matter. Let's do that. And then I've heard, hurt people. And that one was a huge trigger for me.
Why?
Because hurt people, but hurt people, especially in the position that he's in, he should be well aware that there's resources available, and people in his life should know that there's resources available to help him out. He knows that he was hurt, he was abused as a child, X, Y, and Z happened to him as a child. He should know, and the people, not him, but people around him should know, this man needs help. Clearly, what he's doing is not appropriate. He's touching and raping and doing things with these young women. Yeah. Let's stop him.
I think that hurt people is a very powerful phrase. But what do you do to someone who's surrounded by enablers?
Exactly.
He's in a position like like a normal person would have people around them who support what they do and who they are, but also can call them out if they see something that's not appropriate. But what do you do if this is the guy who's the king of the castle? There have been multiple reports about, not confirmed.
Our president grabbing pussies. I mean,
no, not even that.
Go there. You want to add that to the.
But what I'm saying is that there've been multiple reports that people have been around him in his circle that have come out and said things that they think that they're frowned upon. One of his most closest assistants actually came out with a book prior to that. I think it was called The Man Behind the Mask. The one of the times when he was getting pretty much charged for, I think it was about 24 counts of child abuse or something like that. But she pretty much disclosed it, but she got pretty much paid off and nobody really believed her. So, and a lot of the people in his circle were part of the act. They were the ones that told him. So what do you do to someone who, quote unquote, is supposed to know that they've grew up with trauma and they have these resources, but they just refuse to do so because they are the king of the castle and what they say goes.
Exactly. So that's what I mean. So my thing is, hurt people. That's absolutely right. Mm-hmm. But there has to be some level of accountability. You enabled him. You allowed this man to do something. And then years later, when he finally got caught, you want to say, well, I knew that was happening. You're just as big as an asshole as him. You're just as big as an asshole. You're just as big of an asshole as he is.
That's true.
Because you're telling me that you were watching someone get hurt day in and day out, and because you're getting your little check, you're getting your little paycheck, because you want to be part of the crew, because you want to be part of, as we're using now, the terminology, clout, mm-hmm. You're going to allow this man to continue hurting someone, mm-hmm. Then you're an asshole too. So what are we going to do about this? Because it just takes one person to speak up for a change to happen. Mm-hmm. So how many people in that, and again, I have to watch it, so I'm speaking off of what I've seen on social media. Yeah. How many of these people that were on, this show or part of his life, how many of them really, really, truly sat there and asked the girls, hey, are you okay? Do you need anything? I got you. Mm-hmm. Nobody, right?
No.
Nobody.
No.
So why now?
Yeah.
Why now?
I think a lot of the people that came out in the documentary who spoke up, I know that a lot of people were really, really focusing and supporting John Legend in regards to him saying something, being one of the celebrities to come forward and support the act. Not just support, but to vouch how he felt and what he experienced is very powerful and very courageous of him. But he mentions in one of his tweets that he states that it wasn't something that was edgy or something that was he felt like he was crossing a borderline as a musician who have worked with R. Kelly, but he was just saying, I'm not going to support someone who's been mistreating women for almost his entire life, and I'm not going to sit there and pretend like it didn't, like a lot of these other celebrities. They've asked people like Chappelle, they've asked people like Jay-Z, they've asked a lot of people that have been working down the list that work with R. Kelly, and a lot of those people just turned around and didn't say anything or didn't want to promote or be a part of it, but
and I get that.
It's important to say something when you can.
No, and not even. You know what? I get it. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to stay in their lane. Everybody wants to make their money. Everybody wants to do what they got to do to survive. Yeah. So I'm not telling anybody to jump in front of a moving car and to try to save somebody's life. I'm not saying that. But if somebody on the low would have come to these girls and been like, hey, are you okay? Do you need anything? Point them in the right direction to speak up for themselves, this probably wouldn't happen. That person could have remained anonymous. There's ways for you to communicate with somebody. Pass them a little business card, mm-hmm. With, victims information or something like that. Here's somebody to talk to, without having to be known, without having to say, my name is so-and-so, and I believe that R. Kelly did did this, and that. Yeah. No, you don't have to do that. Because a part of me makes me think, like, why? Again, I'm really big about why now. Yeah. R. Kelly did this years ago, and now it's all Decades. Surfacing, and all of this.
I think it was in mid 2000s that this is all going down pretty much.
Same with the Bill Cosby thing. Don't get me. I'm not saying that these men shouldn't be condemned, because sooner or later they're gonna get theirs. You know what I mean? But why did it take so long? What are we doing as a society? What are we doing wrong that allow that
behavior like this is
behavior is being brushed off.
Yeah.
Like even with the Me Too movement, how many people ended up coming up and talking about things that happened to them years ago. Mm-hmm. And we've progressed. We've come such a long way in mental health and like awareness and campaigning and all these things. But what the fuck are we doing as a society that we have to wait years later to re-traumatize these people, essentially, because whether or not you realize that you're bringing up these things that maybe these girls weren't ready to disclose.
Yeah.
And you're bringing it up, and now it's a whole show. It's a tweet. It's on Instagram. It's everywhere.
Yeah, with the internet now,
yeah,
everybody's the stage. Everyone has a platform to voice their opinion.
Yeah.
But not only that, but everyone can be put on stage, on the pedestal to pretty much get ripped down upon.
Yeah,
you know?
and even us talking about R. Kelly now, we're glorifying him, even if we don't realize it. We're causing so much, we're bringing awareness to him. But like, has anybody actually really talked about the victims? Has anybody really sat there and said, we hope that these girls are okay, that they have the right sources, that they are given what they need, especially now that this all surfaced?
Yeah.
But no, I have yet to see that. I have seen, oh, R. Kelly's this, R. Kelly's that. But has anyone talked about these victims? Has anybody been like, okay, we don't know who these girls are, but we just want them to know we're here for you.
Mm-hmm. What scares me the most about it, and I like how you touched upon, being able to say something when you can, and one person's voice can change everything, in particular when something like that's going down. And as a society, what are we really doing? Not allowing these kind of behaviors to be brushed off. What scared me about it the most is, you remember Leah, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Leah was about 14 to 13, I believe, when she first started getting into like the music business hardcore. But her uncle, or I think it was, her uncle was R. Kelly's manager, and basically, through that, she connected with R. Kelly. He took her under his wing, and he pretty much started, producing a lot of the music that she was making. Turns out, R. Kelly got married to Aaliyah and got her pregnant. Do you know how old she was when that happened?
Like 15.
She was 15. Now, that in itself is controversial, but what's really scary is that the marriage happened in Chicago, and it was forged that she was 18 at the time. Now, her parents are declining and saying that that was something that they didn't know about, and they got annulled, so on and so forth. Why, as a parent, are you allowing your 14 to 15-year-old daughter to go and be in the studio with this guy, to spend hours and hours with him alone, to fly around the world and not be on top of what's happening, And I think that this kind of speaks volumes in regards to not only just, R. Kelly himself as a person, but like just us being more conscious about what's happening around us,
No, I think you're speaking, and I love hearing you speak like that, but I think you're speaking because of you've heard your social worker wife preach about all this stuff. Mm. I could also see the flip side as why they trusted somebody. They wanted their daughter to be happy. They spoke, they knew that they couldn't really be part of this lifestyle, or at the time, now we have like momagers, like look at Kris Jenner, like she's on top of that with her girls. But back at that time, she just trusted that her daughter was going to be in a good place, that they were going to,
but keep this in mind too, not to cut you off, but to cut you off. When all this news surfaced, right? I get it that back in the day, things weren't brought to light as much as they are now. This woman also flew everywhere and was on every tour, every date, every single location with her daughter. She was part of the tour. But for some reason, things were brushed off and no one knew what was happening.
Because she made a choice.
I feel like it was a kind of situation where it was just hush-hush because of the money.
Yeah, and she made a choice. She made a choice, and she probably made a choice for her daughter. Because nobody's explored that idea either.
Yeah.
She sat with her daughter. Her daughter was 15. What do we do about this? Do we continue? You're talented. You're great. You want to be successful. Is this a roadblock? Can you deal with it? Can we grow from this? Mm-hmm. Or do we expose this man?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And who knows? Aaliyah probably said he was a bad man. I don't want to. I just want to get past it. A lot of victims of sexual abuse do that. Nobody wants to be like, yeah, he did that. He pointed the finger, because it's more trauma for the victim than it actually is the perpetrator.
That is true.
So Aaliyah wanted to keep it on the hush. That wasn't her goal. That was not her plan. He just was there. He took advantage of the situation. She took advantage of a vulnerable girl who all she wanted to do was succeed. Mm-hmm. And as a mother who supported her daughter, we might not agree with how she supported her daughter. She did what she had to do to allow her daughter to continue.
Yeah.
Because it probably, at the time, would have done Aaliyah more damage than good to expose R. Kelly.
That is true. That is true. And that's the scary part about it, when having to make that decision. And with people, in particular in power that have so much influence that they do get away with a lot. And it's crazy how that was happening, and then the whole Bill Cosby thing, which is another conversation about how everyone was just coming out and just telling the truth, and how many voices came out. It all came from that one person. I forgot the name of the woman that did it, but once she started speaking and started bringing things to light, everyone kind of got behind her. And it takes a couple of people have with the same stories just to take them down. And I feel like that with social media and with having the access to the internet and being able to voice and say things anonymously, or with your identity behind it, we can definitely do a lot more social justice behind those kind of crazy people.
Yeah,
it's insane. It really is. So I mean, we can move into our next conversation, which will be a little bit of a sensitive topic, but I mean, why not? Tell me about relationships when it comes to your parents.
Bruh.
Yeah, that's a deep one right there.
My parents.
And it doesn't have to be in specific to your parents. We can do parents in general.
I mean, I gotta talk about what I know. You
Yeah.
know, in order for me to be authentic and really, really speak, I gotta talk about what I know. And what I know is my parents, my Dominican, wonderful, old school parents, are, and it's gonna end up being Spanglish because that's just how it is at this point. When speaking about my parents, I think. My parents are very old school. My parents are people that, talking about trauma, about, in a sense, how hurt people.
Yeah.
And might not even, it doesn't necessarily hold true with my parents, but I feel like they felt like their trauma and their hurt pretty much allowed them to survive. So they're gonna give me what they gotta give me, and whatever. They grew up from their shit. I can too,
Mm-hmm.
My parents, and I think my brother, again, mentioned it in your other podcast, pretty much had very distinct gender roles,
Yeah.
My dad worked. He was never really present because he was working, but he provided the monetary means for us to do the things that we wanted to do. My family went on vacations. I had the latest sneakers. My siblings had the latest sneakers. We were the kids that everybody envied on the block because we not only owned the corner store, but we had all the latest gears. We were always on point. I can't tell you that I know what it is to be told no. I didn't grow up that way,
Yeah.
And my mom was there. My mom picked me up, dropped me off from school, made me breakfast, packed my lunch, dropped me off at my bus stop. Sometimes didn't even drop me off at my bus stop because she didn't trust anybody, so she would drive us directly to school. Kind of
love
mom.
right there.
Was there at 3:00 waiting for me. Come home, full blown dinner was on the table. Like that was my mom. You know what I mean? Like cooked, clean, was there.
Yeah.
She provided the Harlow's basic needs. Food, shelter.
Mm-hmm.
But was unable to provide the emotional support that we needed. You know what I mean? Like my mom and my dad didn't grow up having much. My mom was an orphan. My mom's mom died when she was about 3 years old. My grandfather was in the military, so my mom house hopped.
Yeah.
And then my dad also came from a military background. Was the youngest. Was pretty much, by the time my grandparents had my dad, they were pretty much checked out. Like emotionally, like they were just
Of course.
done. So my parents were very independent at a very young age, and that was pretty much the mindset that they had coming into having kids. And I think that's why they meshed very well. Their childhoods were pretty much hand in hand, so they kind of understood when each other's faults and their inability to express emotions was okay. For my parents, because they
I never
weren't.
thought about it like that. Yeah, they both come from similar backgrounds. They kind of know or not know what to expect of each other in regards to emotion, support, things of that nature. Things kind of, the two pieces fit together.
Yeah, and that tough love shit. You know what I mean? Like my parents were very, very militant. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm talking about military in DR. I'm not talking about military here. They were very militant in DR. Like, yo, it is what it is, or you get your head chopped off, kind of thing. And their households were very similar to that. Though my grandmother, may she rest in peace, was a very loving individual. She was also very old. And
why do you think she grew up differently?
my grandma?
Yeah.
My grandma was a very Catholic woman. her God, her Bible, her little cross. You know, she was very, very. God paved the way for everything. You know what I mean? And in that, even in that, she was very respectful. She honored her husband. You know, if you speak to my aunts, they argue that, a Spanish phrase, era más mujer que madre, which is, translation is more of a woman than a wife. My grandma honored my grandfather. You know, when there was things with and I'm speaking from my aunts, you know, my dad never spoke like that about my grandma, but like, if there was situations going on and my grandfather needed attention, my grandfather, she honored her husband, like in the Bible. Honor your husband. When you get married, you become one. And, you know, she was about her husband. Her husband was her ride or die. To the point where in her deathbed, my grandfather and my grandma died holding hands. Like, they were committed. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were.
That's scary. Wow.
My grandma got dementia, and the one person she remembered and cooked for 12,000 times was my grandfather. Like, she don't remember her childhood, she don't remember her mom, she remembered her husband. You know, it was like that's the love, you know. So back to my parents. So my parents kind of understood that lack of emotion. You know, I can't tell you that I ever heard my dad ever tell my mom he loved her. But she just knew. Like, it wasn't a question. She just knows. I mean, if they're still together, she just knows. Like, it's just like...
That's funny. I never hear that either.
I never...
To each
other. You've been in my life long enough to know, like...
You don't think about that because it's kind of like we... Not we as in
we're
like
desensitized.
A couple, but we kind of understood that universal language where it wasn't spoken of, but it was known.
No, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that my dad, you know, growing up, I remember telling my dad, like, oh, papi, tú me quieres. You got a roof over your head. Like, duh. Like, duh, stupid. Like, you're not homeless. You got clothes. I love you. Like, that was my dad's love language. And I think that that's both of my parents' love language is mandatory. You know, even when we had disagreements growing up, my parents and I think I've never, to this day, I can't recall of a time where my parents have said, I'm sorry. But I got, like, the latest phone after a huge argument. Like, you know what I mean? That was just how my parents functioned. Yeah. You know, and for a very long time, it worked for me. But as I grew older, I realized that wasn't my love language. You know, I'm an English major. I you know, I found my love in writing, and I found my love in words. So I want to talk about it. I mean, you more than anybody know. Let's talk about it. How do you feel? Let's, you know, communicate. Let's write about it. You wanna be angry at me? I'll shoot you a text, but we gotta talk about it. You know. So when I developed that voice, when I developed my love for word, my relationship with my parents became estranged. It became very difficult. How do you talk to somebody who doesn't know words? You know, like,
doesn't speak your language.
It doesn't. You know, we to this day do not speak the same language, but I have managed to live and survive with them. Yeah. And I love my parents. And again, I think that it's an unspoken rule. They love me. You know, like I never felt like I wasn't loved. I just always felt empty. You know what I mean? They were both present, but they weren't present emotionally. They were never really provided that emotional support that we needed. And I say we because I listened to my brother in your previous broadcast talk about my parents. I would pretty much describe them the same way.
So let me ask you this. So there's a lot to unpack there, but I'll just focus on the on the concept.
That's a whole podcast in itself. We really should have done that.
But, you know, in regards to your relationship with your parents, and I get how you came up, you know, started growing up and understanding a different type of language when it came to showing your love and how the relationship did get strained. What kind of advice would you give to someone, say, for instance, that was having a hard time going past the phase of, you know, adapting a new way of speaking to their parents in regards to what they want? Like, for example, like, you're big into communication and your parents are big on giving monetary things. So a lot of people get caught up on the concept that they have to go through that trauma or kind of force their parents or significant other or person in their life to change and adapt to what they have, as opposed to someone like yourself who's grown past it and understood that, you know, love them for who they are, not for what they aren't.
What's your end game? I think that question in itself, and referring to a book, it didn't start with you. That book, I read that not too long ago, and it hit home. It's a great book. It hit home for me.
What's the
But I'm horrible at like authors. Mark
I'll leave a link
something.
in the description. It's fine.
It didn't start with you, and I think in that book that that book spoke volumes to me. I sat in my at home, and I wanted to like send it to like all my siblings and like all my family members and like, oh my god, I want to highlight it. Let's talk about it. Let's have a book club meeting about it. You know, like
that book spoke about a lot of things that are important.
Because unfortunately, I don't have a very tight relationship with my first siblings. I have a brother and a sister, my older brother and sister, and because they could not deal, their boundaries were huge, and they could not deal with the relationship that they had with my brother, my mom, and my dad, and I don't blame them for it. I completely understand, because I've found myself in that predicament with my parents. So my question is, what's your end game? What do you want your life to look like, and how do you get there? And in the book, you know, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting word for word, but he essentially says, parenting doesn't come with a manual. You know what I mean? I mean, and now as a parent, I realize that more than ever. Your parents are inevitably gonna make a mistake. What you choose to do with that mistake is what determines whether or not you have a relationship with your parents. And I think that I'm at the point in my life where my relationship with my parent is a relationship because I want it to be a relationship, not because I'm expecting them to change, not because I'm expecting for them to understand that a lot of things that they did were not okay. Because I think that my parents are 60-something years old and they still don't get it. It still hasn't clicked in their head, because they don't have any more room for growth, but I do.
Yes.
And in growing, I know that I love my parents and that they mean a lot to me, and that I can love them and still have boundaries. So when my parents become too much, I can easily just, you know, stop talking to them or give myself a day or two to refresh, restart, and reset.
Yeah.
You know, my relationship with them. And I think that in learning that boundary, I feel like I have grown to have a better relationship with them. My mother in particular, my mother grinds my gears. My mother really truly made me because she knows how to trigger me. No one in this world
knows you better than
can rock me like my mother.
Yeah.
You know, but because if I can handle my mother, I can handle anybody else. So I gotta thank her for that. You know what I mean? I gotta thank her for being that trigger for me.
She raised a tough cookie.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and a lot of the things, you know, though I may not disagree with them, though I may disagree with her methods and not use it with our son, because a lot of the things that my parents, a lot of the ways that my parents lacked, and a lot of the lack of communication that there is between my parents and my siblings, I don't ever want to have that with my son or ever want to teach that generational trauma that carries on in my family. I don't want that for myself. So with that, I took what they did and what they didn't do, and I maximized it, and I'm making it work for me.
And I'm sure that our son's going to have the same kind of experience. There are going to be things that we do as a couple or as a family that he doesn't support necessarily, and may have to make that slight change into his kids. But I mean, that
and I think that for us,
thing is very, very important.
I think for us, we know how to say sorry. You know what I mean? And that was something that I learned. I mean, it's really hard. Like,
something that you hate. Something that you hate that I say now that I adapted that I love mentioning is, I'm not a victim of your trauma.
Yeah, and I want to punch you in your
trauma
face for it, but
something so simple like you didn't pick up your clothes. You got mad because your mom used to throw your clothes on the ground, and when you grew up, and now you're mad that I'm doing it, but I'm not a victim of your trauma. It's like you need to make a change.
Yeah, and it pisses me off. Oh God, it makes me so angry, but it's allowed me to catch myself. You know, sometimes I get really emotional, and then, you know, and I feel like I'm upset. I'm like, oh, you know, I want things to work. I want to create this picture of my life to fill a void that I have, you know. Not realizing that, you know what, I'm doing my best. I'm doing the best with our son. I want to communicate with him as much as possible. I'm learning how to say I'm sorry. I'm learning to take his lead because, you know, I grew up in a very Dominican household. Tú no pagas biles, tú no tienes stress. You know what I mean? Like, and translation, you don't pay bills, you don't have stress. The fuck are you stressing for? What are you depressed? Depressed about what? I give you everything. You know?
Why are you upset?
You know, and I joke around with my father to this day. And, you know, my profession is mental health. You know, I deal with trauma and emotions every day. And I told my dad, if everybody had the mentality that he had, I would be broke. You know, so it's very interesting, you know, and it's funny. My dad's a very educated man. He reads a lot of books. He's very, very in tuned, but has not been able to be in tuned enough with his emotions. There's so much trauma and hurt in his personal life that he's never really fully gotten there. You know, he may logically some verses and tell you things that may touch home, but he's never really been able to put things into practice.
That's someone I'd love to have on this podcast.
Yeah, he's
break him down.
He's enlightened. My dad, I gotta give my siblings and my older brother and my younger brother and myself, and even my sister, but us three, I feel like in a podcast would be very interesting. Our way of thinking is very renowned, and I think that we gotta give that credit where credit's due, and it's my dad. My dad is a man. He will read a book in 2 hours and tell you exactly what happened. That's a talent, and there's not been a topic that I have encountered in my life that I cannot talk to my dad about.
I think he's hungry for knowledge, and that's something that he's passed on to you and your brother. For you, it would be more or less the textbook, the literature, the ear to the ground, the people, and for your brother, it'd be technology. You guys have both inherited that want, that thirst for knowledge, and when you get your eyes on something that you're interested in, or something that questions or sparks your interest, it's like setting a wild horse to run.
I mean, and even my older brother, you haven't really gotten an opportunity to meet or speak to him because, again, unfortunately, our relationship is estranged. But he and I think very much alike. I mean, I remember the little conversations that he and I have had. I've always been intrigued by his brain because it's very similar to mine, And mind you, we're about 10 years different in age difference, but we pretty much can hold a conversation and articulate things very well. But I feel like he and I, and I'm speaking based on simply my conversation with him, we struggle with the same thing, we grew up with a dad who felt like, and a mom, we have different mothers, but like my mom, I speak for my mom, where it was like very militant, I'm an adult, you listen to what I say, you gotta do this with no explanation, and I am a person who lives in the why. I need to know why things happen. I need to know what's the outcome. I need to know who, what, where, and why for me to do things. So growing up in a household where it was like, you got to do this just because I said, I struggled with that. And I still struggle with that, with authority. And I noticed it a lot in jobs, when I was told, I was at a point in my life where if I felt like you were stupid, I couldn't listen to you. As much as I knew that I needed to listen to you to get my job done, I felt like you're stupid. Like, why am I going to listen to somebody who I feel is stupid? I had to have some level of respect for my employers or my bosses in order for me to work effectively.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of soul searching, and it took a lot of digging within myself to realize that came from the not having that in my household. You know what I mean? Like, who the fuck are you to be telling me what to do? You know what I mean? Not that I thought that I was smarter than anyone, but I had to develop that connection in order for me to work. And that's why I feel like in my field, I'm excelling, because my field is all about connection, where I was able to put two and two together. I knew that I had to connect with somebody. I had to meet them where they were at in order for me to function. But rather these, jobs where I was discovering myself and I was told, you got to do this, you got to flip this, you got to do that, that doesn't work for me. That doesn't. And I noticed it in my younger brother, going back to him, where he wants to be an entrepreneur. And why? Why is that? Because he doesn't do well with direction. And that's all taught. That was all taught. And I can assure you that if I have a conversation with my older brother, I'm pretty sure that that's his issue as well.
Yeah, no, it's a powerful thing to be able to come down to someone's level. I was reading, or I am still reading, the book The Shack, and in one scene, there's this guy who, his name is Mac, and he has a big tragedy in his life, and he ends up not to spoil too much, but he ends up having a tragedy with one of his kids. His kid dies, ends up being very, very stubborn through his life, and becomes very upset, and ends up getting a letter in his mail about meeting someone at the same shack where his kid died, and end up being he met God, and God came in 3 different forms, but in one of the forms came to him, and they spoke, and he said, how do I speak to someone who knows so much, it's so grand, how do I hold the conversation with you? How am I supposed to believe, and have, believe that you're all knowing and all good, and that time God mentioned that, I already know everything you're going to say, and I already know, all that is, and where this conversation is going to go, but I don't, I humble myself to not make you feel that, I come down, and I understand that, to level with you, to speak to you, I have to pretend as if I didn't know all of that, even though I do. And I think having that level of empathy in general when you're speaking or leading or becoming anything in your life is the only way you're going to get people to follow you. You know, your boss is going to boss you around, but the person who you want to be behind is a leader and someone who can not only show you that they're willing to give you direction, but they can sit down and tell you why. And I think it's great that you've developed that very, very well because your whole job is about leading people, like day in and day out.
Yeah. And I think that's powerful, but it was funny how it was, again, I did a lot of healing. I did a lot of growing these past year or two.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to make that connection. And when I did that, I was able to be like, oh, shit, like, and again, and I say this not to blame my parents because, like I said, they don't have a manual.
No.
I didn't come into the
There's
world
no
and they, like, but they didn't check in. And I think that I check in, you know what I mean? I check in with myself. And I think that has made me an effective parent. And,
It's helped me, and I saw how you had that growth and how you took ownership of the relationship. You didn't become a victim of it, but you took ownership of it. In regards to a lot of my relationships with a couple of people in my family, I've learned that having an understanding of what your end game is and what you expect or want out of the relationship will help you pick the roses out of the garden. Who are going to be the people that you want to surround yourself with, who are the people that you want to be around with and willing to make the sacrifice with, what relationships that are shitty you're willing to either make small changes to or accept them for what they are and categorize them as you should, just like you would with your friends. So
and I think, you know what, and I have a relationship with my parents right now, again, because my end game was for them to meet my son and spend time with my son and that's like, but I also feel like I can understand the need to close a chapter in your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I love my older siblings, but we're at a place where they're not ready so I think my interpretation of our relationship is that they're not ready to speak to me. Mm-hmm. For me. They're ready. They still see me through the eyes of my parents. They still think that I am very much like my parents. They have a difficult time differentiating the two. Though I lived with my parents, that does not mean that I am them. Yeah. And we're at the point in our lives where we have respectfully chosen, they have respectfully chosen to close that door. And I respect them enough to say, okay, that's cool. I love you, and I respect loving you from afar. I disagree with it. I feel like we can move forward if you're able to have a relationship with me that does not include my parents. Amen. But it doesn't seem to have worked that way.
Yeah.
And I think and I say that in saying that I feel like we can have a relationship with people and still set boundaries. I love my siblings. They're my siblings. They're they're my family. But I love them enough to know that it's okay for us not to speak.
Yeah, and I think it's important to set boundaries and not be afraid to. If you really care about the relationship, you don't have to chop it off and completely be done with it. I've heard of some people that even silence the partner or person that they don't want to be around anymore because of a super simple fight. But a simple fight could have been avoided if you would have had that boundary. If you would have set that expectation, or not even an expectation, but set that set that restriction in regards to what you accept or what you don't, and are willing to let the other person either make the change or adapt to it, or you just let the relationship be what it should be, whether you want to be around there or not.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the relationships that are like, I don't want to talk to you anymore, stuff like that, that's because your ego was hurt. Mm-hmm. You're at a point in your life where you haven't had enough emotional growth to understand that your ego plays a large part in how you react to people.
Yeah, I've learned how to silence my ego big time and eat a lot of shit. I've had to completely control my ego and downsize it all the way. But it sounds like our little guy is waking up now, so we're gonna have to cut this short. Any last words?
No, we're gonna continue this conversation later.
Alrighty then. Well, this has been an awesome episode. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you have us on YouTube. And if not, if you're listening to this on iTunes and or SoundCloud, be sure to subscribe and tune in to our next episode. Mama, thank you so much for joining the podcast, and I will